So that's why we would kind of laugh sometimes when we would get called emo or punk, because we're like, well, listen to our record. I mean, it's pretty poppy. It's almost an insult to emo people.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was the Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Ultimate Fakebook is a three-piece power pop band from Manhattan, Kansas. They released 3 full-length albums, Electric Kissing Parties in 97, This Will Be Laughing Week in 99, Open Up and Say Awesome in 2002, and shortly after releasing their EP Before We Spark in 2003, they broke up. So the way I got in touch with these guys is a couple months ago, I guess now. They posted on their Instagram account a flyer from the Wayne Firehouse, and it had them, and I believe Humble Beginnings was on the bill, and then my old band Lanemeyer. Once I saw that, I was like, oh shit, I got to reach out to these guys and talk to them, because I remember them from back then. I remember we talked about this too, like his voice with that, that falsetto and just that poppy sound. And I talked about this too. I remember them having this like buddy relationship with the Stereo, who I also want to get on here. So if you know the Stereo, please reach out to those dudes and let me know. So I thought they'd be an excellent interview, and I just sent them a message. I think it was Facebook. It took us a while to get this interview together because I was trying to coordinate with Eric and Bill at the same time. We had some cancellations and we finally locked down a date, so I got them on the Skype, and this is what we talk about. Bro Hymn by Pennywise, having falsetto in their songs, alternative music, touring with Nada Surf, Tenacious D, their first drummer, the At the Drive-In Get Up Kids tour that went through Wayne, New Jersey, being the backing band for Reggie and the Full Effect, Epic Records, why they stopped touring, playing with Kiss, and a ton more. So before we start, I need your help. I realize this podcast is a nice break from the current state of affairs, which can suck my ass. So what I want to do is stock up on as many interviews as possible so that every Friday you guys have something to listen to take a break from all of this shit that's going around. The problem is that some of these people are really fucking hard to get in touch with. Now, I've messaged a lot of these names either through their Instagram accounts or email, and I haven't gotten a response either because they don't check it, or they're flooded with emails, or they're like, who the fuck is this guy? So what I need from you is a little help in connecting with them. Now, if you have a direct connection, please reach out to them, tell them about the podcast, and see if they want to be interviewed. If they say yes, just email thiswasthescene@gmail.com and let me know, or introduce me on there, or just message me on Facebook and Instagram so I can set up some time with them. That's just going to help me have more of these interviews. So here's a list of the bands I'm trying to reach. Now, some of you might be like, oh, fuck that, I don't want to hear that. But this is just what's been on my list for a while, and I want to chip away at this. This doesn't mean that these are the only names or bands or whatever from back then that I want to talk to. This is just something that's top of mind that I'm thinking of. So if you have a direct connection, please let me know. So here's the list. Tilt, Against All Authority, Save Ferris, No Idea Records, Vagrant Records, Big Wheel, J Tree, MU330, Jimmy Eat Worlds, Mineral, Steve Evans, who I have talked to, and I think he's just super busy. So if you know him, just give him a nudge. Be like, hey man, you talk to this guy. Goldfinger, Jiker, Heft, Rhythm Collision. And I know I have another list somewhere, but that's just like what I've got going on right now. And if you have suggestions, let me know. Now, do keep me in mind, keep it to the late 90s, early 2000s. I've had some people reach out to me where their bands have started in the like 2002 or 2005. Like, that's not really who I'm looking to talk to. If you started in the mid 90s or late 90s and played in the scene, then please let me know. Like, another one would be like Dynamite Boy. I think that's like another one. Or someone mentioned Douglas. So just like pull out old comps if you have them, or look up, like look at the Fearless comps, look at No Idea Records comps, look at, I don't know, whoever. If someone was a booking agent from back then, like let me know. Lastly, if you want to help out, since I'm a freelance graphic designer and animator, and this is the time where people stop spending money and other companies start spending more money in their marketing, that's going to be very helpful for me for connections, because if I'm cold emailing people, they're not going to want to hear me. So referrals are very helpful. If you are a company that actually is spending money and you are looking to keep your marketing going with video content or just some graphics for your content, please reach out to me at mike@drive80.com, because it's going to be very helpful. If not, and you don't have any of that, if you want to donate to the podcast, it's $1 a month through Patreon. I don't charge any more than that. And also, just to kind of give it back, if you don't want to spend it on this podcast, fine. Find someone out there, a local business, or just another freelancer, and either give a referral or buy something from them, or take a skill that you have and just give it away for free. I think what we need right now is just some fucking positivity and people just helping one another, because that's what's going to keep this thing going. The small things you do is going to make you feel better. It's going to make someone feel really good. And that's what we need right now. So please go do those things. And that's all I'm going to say. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia, especially now. With that said, let's get fucking started. There was like a bunch of bands that I've wanted to reach out to, and there's bands that I forget about, or I'll be like, oh, fuck yeah, I forgot about that band. You guys posted a photo on Instagram with my old band in, it was a flyer when you guys played in Wayne, New Jersey.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
So I had commented on that from, my band was Lanemeyer. We had played together at that show, but I remember you guys playing in Wayne. I just didn't remember that we played that show with you. So I was like, fuck, man, I never was shot.
Yeah. Were you guys because I remember playing that show, but I was that maybe the only time we played together? I'm trying to think.
I think so, because you guys are from.
Well, we started as a band in Manhattan, Kansas, which is the kind of like underdog college town of Kansas, and but once we kind of started playing out more and making more of like a Kansas local following, we kind of considered Manhattan, Lawrence, and Kansas City kind of like equal home bases, because we played there so much. And no one really, if we say Manhattan, Kansas, no one really knew what we were talking about. But so we would just start to, after a while, we'd go, Kansas City, they'd heard of that.
That's where I got confused. Yeah. Because we would go on tour and we'd be going through, I don't think we played Kansas City, but we would drive through it. And I'm going, wait a minute, this city is in two states,
right?
And that confused me.
Yeah.
So I mean, as much as
like I'm not a
Trump
too.
Yeah, I was like, I say, like, I'm not a Trump fan, but I was kind of like, yeah, but I've made that mistake.
Yeah, totally.
I have all this doom and gloom that seems to be going on. It's like, let's not talk about that bullshit. Like, let's talk about the fucking 90s scene.
Yeah, it was great. Last week I was in the studio with some friends, and it was kind of awesome to be incubated away from the world.
Yeah, it's just, I know people are like, oh, what do you think of this? I'm like, man, it's just, I don't care. I honestly don't give a fuck, because everything comes in is ebbs and flows, and I was like, I can't control any of this shit, so I just want to just focus on the things that I want to focus on. And right now it's going to be this conversation talking about back in the day. But yeah, man, so the way I structure this is really just going back in time, talking to both you guys, like how you both got into music, how you got into punk rock, like how that led to you guys meeting, how you guys created the band, talk about recording your first album, get on labels, going on tours, any crazy stories. And then, well, technically, you guys took a break. You never like really disbanded, right? And because you guys have been going strong again since 2000. So I've been reading. So 2013, it says you guys just kind of just have lightly played shows.
Define going strong.
Well, I mean, I think going well. Okay.
Played a reunion show once every 2 years since 2009. Whenever friends would get together, there would be a good reason for it. So we got back together after breaking up in 2003. We got back together in 2009 to do a benefit concert. And then I think we did a wedding thing for one of our friends. And then we did another benefit concert. And so every now and then we would just kind of get back together and play the old songs.
Well, I think that, I mean, I would say going strong, yeah, definitely. But the fact that you put out an album in 2010 and you guys are recording now, or you just put out a new album?
Well, the 2010 album isn't actually new. It's all the shit that was sitting around that we didn't use before we broke up. So the 2010 record is all recordings that were from the original period of the band. And so this new album that we just finished, that's coming out in April, is the first new music that we've put out in 16 years.
I mean, I think it's semi-strong, because you guys are still getting together and playing, because all you guys now live on the West Coast.
Well, Bill and I do. Nick's still in Kansas.
How the fuck?
Actually, is he in Missouri now? He's in Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say in a way you could say going strong, just in the sense that when we do the reunion shows, they've been amazing. Like the fan base is still kind of there with us to kind of have these sort of just parties, you know, sort of celebrating the scene that we all started together or got our start in together. So it's strong in the sense that when we do things, it's really, really fun. It's really well received by our fans, which is so cool. It's been like not frequent, but it's been strong in that sense. And, you know, the Descendants actually just asked us to play like 4 shows last year. Things like that'll kind of pop up.
It's kind of like we get together for parties.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, our friends are having a show. Let's go party.
I think that's better. I almost feel that if we all had that the ability to have that attitude back then, it would have been a less stress. I mean, I don't know if we're going to find out how you guys mesh together as a band, but I know with my band, we were just constantly just at odds because we really wanted to make it work and there was so much pressure around it. But now when we get together and play shows, it's way more fun. It's like a party. Back then too, like you guys had a good sized following, and I felt like when you played shows, from my perspective, you had a good fan base come out and have that energy. Did you find that it's a bit different now? Is there like more energy in the shows you guys play now, or is it more of like, because I've noticed a lot of more people you'll pack the house, but everyone's afraid to move because they don't want to spill their beer?
I kind of feel like it's the exact same. It feels like we as a band and also the fans haven't missed a beat. Is kind of how it feels to me. Obviously, we're all older, but we're all just as silly and having fun at shows and definitely spilling the beers. Yeah, like we played one show in Kansas City, and I remember taking a picture because we played one song and the entire stage was covered in beer. I mean, it was just absolutely. Eric, you didn't see it, but it was at the record bar. There was beer everywhere, and it was just like, fuck yeah, we're gonna rock.
Well, it's kind of fun because the new single that we put out, the A side is Manhattan, Kansas, which is a celebration of our old hometown and kind of where we got our start. And then the B side is Little Apple Girl, which is a song about a girl who lived in Manhattan, Kansas, because Manhattan's called the Little Apple. It's a B-side live track from 2010, I think, at the record bar. Yeah. And you can hear it's not perfect. Like we put it on there, not because it was like a perfect live recording of what the band sounds like, but because you can hear people screaming and going crazy, and you can hear us like messing up notes and stuff like that because we're rocking out so hard. It's like, who cares?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, we wanted you to listen to that song and reflect on it and go, oh yeah, that's what it's like to see these guys live. It's not perfect. It's messy and it's energetic and it's crazy and it's fun and it's silly and it's stupid. And you can hear all that in that live track, which is kind of fun.
Is that on Spotify?
Yeah, it is. And that song now kind of traditionally it's usually our last song in the set, and so we invite the crowd up on stage with us. So that's the other thing to imagine while you're listening to that song is we're surrounded by like 30 people, 30 to 50 people.
It's and like a pinball machine. We're all bouncing off of them.
Yeah.
It's like a very light bro hymn.
What is? I have no idea what that is.
Pennywise, when they do like like the really.
Oh yeah,
we don't know Pennywise.
I've never seen any Pennywise. I think I've probably heard him back in the day, maybe. But
it was a song that they had with their first bass player, and then when that guy he killed himself, and they put out another album after that, but they have a live version of them playing that song, and it's just the entire place is singing along with them, and they're all like jumping on the stage. So it's like their song. I think they like end the show with where everyone fucking comes up and everyone sings along.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Exactly.
So, don't worry, you won't lose any scene points for not knowing that.
Well, I mean, that's the funny thing is when you get into our history and you ask us about punk rock, you'll start to clue in pretty quickly on a couple of things.
I've talked to a bunch of people and they're like, yeah, I got started on Descendants. So many people have said that, and I'm like, you know what? I never truly got into the Descendants. Like, and people are like, what? I'm going, yeah, I was listening to more harder stuff, and then I got, then it was Face to Face and Lagwagon, and then that progressed over to more like Jimmy Eat World, Mineral, and Get Up Kids and all that shit. Everyone was really into it back then. I was like, it just wasn't that sound that got me, but it's, so people were like, oh, this Descendants song. I'm like, I know Bikeage.
Yeah, totally. That's what's so interesting and awesome about all this stuff, music and in general and rock and roll scenes, is how everybody's influenced by different stuff. I mean, I literally was just talking to Justin Pierre from Motion City Soundtrack.
Yeah.
We recorded last week together, and he was telling me how he literally had never heard anybody do falsetto, in this kind of music until I did. And that's kind of how he started doing that. And it was like blown away.
Wow.
And I've actually heard that from somebody else in a really huge band, but
which band?
But
come on,
well,
drop the name.
I don't know if I want to say, because I have no idea I haven't talked to the guy for forever, but I just remember Patrick from Fall Out Boy telling me the exact same thing. And so my point is, it's like, that it's so just like I wouldn't know certain punk things, because of when I come into the scene, it's X time, or you come into the scene at your time, you hadn't heard the Descendants. Some of these other guys that might be younger than us, they hadn't even heard XYZ. And so we all just come at this at a different time.
Right. I mean, I was a fan of Tool when I got into all those harder bands, and then my friends were going, we're playing shows, they're like, okay, dude, you got to take that Tool sticker off your bass. And I was like, what? They're like, yeah, it's gonna fuck with us. And I do remember that, because the falsetto thing, 100%. I mean, that was like one of your guys, like, I wouldn't say calling card, but you having that vocal style definitely stood out, and that was like definitely paired with your guys' sound.
Yeah, and Justin was asking me like why I sort of started that, and I was kind of like, I couldn't even come up with an answer, because as Eric will remember, well, he wasn't even in the very, very first couple of things Ultimate Fakebook recorded as a 3-piece band, but basically we were a 4-piece, and then the singer left. We still had studio time booked, and me and Nick just on the fly decided to completely change our sound and have me be the singer. And I'd never sang anything in my life. I guess it was just, I didn't know any better. I wanted those notes to be in the melodies, it didn't seem weird to me, but it's one of those things that's hard to, come up with a good answer for.
That's a good starting point. So as a kid, like, what was that one song or maybe that music video that it caught you off guard, and then your music was just like, I have to pay attention to this?
Who do you want to go first?
Whoever.
Well, I'll go first since I got to drop off in 5 minutes. Kiss. It was Kiss. I was a tiny kid. I was 6 years old, and I got Kiss Destroyer on vinyl. And I loved the combination of the makeup and the crazy superhero outfits, and the music was just weird and strange and very theatrical. And so I got into heavy metal really, really young because of Kiss, and basically got to the point where thrash metal was kind of my favorite thing. And then I discovered the Minneapolis scene, Soul Asylum, Husker Du, and the Replacements. And that kind of changed everything for me, because then I realized that you don't have to play metal. You can play aggressive, loud, melodic music, like the Beatles, but turned up really loud and with a lot of distortion. And so that's what Soul Asylum and those bands, Replacements and Husker Du, kind of did for me. And so from then on out, when I was playing in bands, when I was in high school, they were metal bands, but then that morphed into, kind of, I guess, what you would call college rock bands. And I was playing in a Midwestern Americana with more fuzz, Dinosaur Jr. style band called Truck Stop Love. And that's where I was when I saw Ultimate Fakebook.
Actually, it's funny you said Kiss, because when I was younger, my neighbor, he was a huge Kiss fan, and it scared the hell out of me, because Gene Simmons is like the demon or whatever he was.
I used to collect Kiss cards when I was a kid, and I remember seeing, the movie of the week, when they had that horrible, cheesy movie, which Bill references in one of the songs on the new record, because I'm so obsessed with it. I show it to all my friends.
The Phantom
just meets the Phantom of the Park. Yeah.
Yep, I've seen that. Oh God, he just growls the whole time and shoots like lasers.
Yeah, it's fucking great, man.
Yeah, we have a lyric on a song. It's called "After Hours at Melin's," and there's a line that says, "You got a Phantom of the Park to meet." So that's what that's about.
All right, so everyone, Eric had to jump off for a second, but Bill is going to talk about young Bill and what song or video or whatever thing led him into music, and then how that led to like punk.
Yeah, well, basically, I honestly can't remember not loving music. I just somehow knew I was going to do music my entire life from just the earliest memories. I didn't know what that meant or anything, but I just.
But like, what was is that just because you obviously had to have heard something?
Yeah, I think I just loved all music in general. The radio, stuff my older sisters would play, because this is like the 80s here, so top 40 radio and stuff. Actually, though, Nick's dad was in a band in the small town in Kansas that we both come from. And so I do definitely remember loving seeing them play. They were kind of like playing, I guess, classic rock, but they were pretty good. Yeah, I don't know if that played into it, because like I said, I kind of feel like even before that, I knew I was going to do music. But yeah, like some of the first things that I really remember was Quiet Riot, Come On Feel the Noise.
Yes.
Yeah, just remember playing that song at the jukebox at the Pizza Hut. Back in the day, anybody that remembers what it was like to go and play a song on the fucking jukebox and just you ruled the music of the place, and it's just loud, and I just loved it. That was one of the first songs that really I remember really, really getting into. But I mean, I loved all 80s hits, loved Olivia Newton-John, Xanadu, stuff like that.
Everyone has a different reason why they like a song, and it's either a lyric, they like the lyrics, they like the melody, there's a hook. Like, I know for myself, there's always a melodic hook, or the way a lyric is saying that note becomes like addictive, where I have to keep hearing it over and over again. Like, what for you is that thing in a song where you have to have it?
I mean, I definitely agree with you that it's like, I think people gravitate to either lyrics or music. I personally find that if people really analyze what they're into, that's a big factor. You know, that's why some people are just, you know, obsessed with Bob Dylan, and other people are obsessed with the Beatles. Completely different ways to approach amazing music. I'm not saying you can't like both, but I was absolutely a melody person, you know, and a music person. And so I think those are the types of bands and songs that I really gravitated towards. Just things that a melody that would get stuck in your head.
It's like, even now I try to find that with newer songs. I love it where I'm just like going through Spotify and it's this suggested artist, and you hear it and you're like, wait, what the fuck is that? And you know, when you first hear it, you're like, fuck, man, I know I'm going to listen to this over and over and over again. Like, I'm constantly trying to find that to this day.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, you either know right away that you love something, or something is so odd that you don't like it, but it sticks in the back of your mind, and you come back and you start to realize that that's a new sound that you love. Now, I have that happen too, where something seems so weird and stupid, but that's exactly what's going to make me like it in the, you know, a little bit later.
Is there something in your own songwriting? Because I don't want to jump too far ahead, but just since we're here, it makes sense. Is there something in your own songwriting when you're writing a song that thing you look for in other songs is something that has to happen with a song that you created?
Something that has to happen?
Like, is it like the melody, like the things that drive you to want to hear a song? Like, when you're writing a song and you're like, yeah, but it doesn't have that thing that I need this to be, to where I'd want to listen to it.
I guess if I had to come up with an answer, it would be something about a hook, you know, like a really great pop hook, because I'm a huge fan of pop music. So you can kind of hum melodies all day long, but sometimes you come up with something that you're like, oh, that's a hook. That's really sounds like big and anthemic. That's usually something I gravitate toward, rather than something more subtle or understated. You know, it's usually kind of a big statement, music melody wise.
So how did liking music, how'd that lead to you getting into punk? Like, I always just ask if people got into punk rock, they might be like, well, it was more, I liked hardcore or something. So I just use punk as the thing that is the glue to get you in the scene. So I guess, like, what led you to, what led you to getting involved in this scene?
Well, I can totally answer. It's literally just us as a band playing all ages shows. And that's the type of bands that you tend to play with, are gritty, kind of do-it-yourself, no-nonsense rock and roll bands, as opposed to, say, you know, something that would be a packaged, pretty package, you know, because honestly, it was that was our entrance into the scene, was just playing those type of shows rather than the music. In other words, like Eric was saying, you know, the closest to punk rock that I think our sensibilities were hitting was things like the Replacements, Soul Asylum, Nirvana. Sonic Youth was a huge band for me growing up. So it's like, those are bands that all were influenced by punk legends and punk rock, quote unquote, but we weren't big. We don't have some part of our chapter of music, you know, love that's I would categorize as punk rock. Now, granted, the Descendants is a band that Eric showed to me and Nick, and they were very melodic. And also I really liked their lyrical standpoint, that it was like just these suburban regular guys singing about regular life. Like it wasn't super political, which is something that I guess I may have always thought that punk rock mostly was. And so it didn't really interest me from where I was coming from as a rock music person. I was interested, like we said earlier, I was interested mostly in the music, and punk usually is mostly, I'd say, lyric and the intention of the whole thing. You know what I mean? As opposed to like, there's not a lot of like guitar solos. There's not a lot of like keyboards, there's not a lot of string section, I'm not saying they don't, but
you're right. Originally, when punk rock started, because anyone listening to this podcast, this focus like the late 90s, early 2000s. So anything before this, people could say that this era that I'm talking about isn't, what they consider punk rock. And I consider anything that happened in the mid 2000s and up not really punk rock, even though there's some bands now where I can say like, yeah, the style is punk and there are punk bands. But the original start of punk was very political and aggressive. And I think I was the same as you, where I was like, I liked aggressive sounds, but I didn't. These guys were. It felt like they were reading books and staying up with the news and researching as it was pissing them off, and that just didn't. I didn't gravitate towards that. But when I heard the more melodic stuff, I really liked that. But it was the grunge bands that I really liked that edge, like Eric was saying. What did they call that style of music? Like Mudhoney and Lemonheads. What was that word? Alternative.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it got all thrown into the alternative radio or alternative rock or whatever when it was like there was MTV and there was radio, and that these bands were getting bigger, but they needed kind of a you come up with one genre that just kind of is a catch-all for everything. Like if anybody out there remembers watching 120 Minutes on MTV, what a great fucking show. But one of the reasons it was so amazing was you might see punk stuff, you might see PIL or the Descendants video, but you'd also see the Sundays or the Smiths. It was alternative, was nice in that sense that it could be a catch-all for a lot of interesting music. It wasn't prepackaged pretty boy MTV rock and roll. It was like way more intelligent and different. So that's the stuff we grew up on. So there may have been a little bit of punk rock, but it wasn't we didn't start from a place of punk rock. We started from a place of MTV, tell you the truth.
Well, yeah, I mean that sounded like when you guys would play, you were more, I feel like bands like Weezer kind of bulldoze that way for bands to just kind of have like a rock sound, but have that vocal thing where like, oh, they're actually singing. Just by you talking about those, quote unquote alternative bands, it sounded like you guys completely plugged into that.
Yes.
And just happened to go, well, how can we do this all the time? Well, let's play these local shows, which are punk bands, but you guys fit right in because of bands like Weezer, they were the same kind of band technically that could do that.
Yeah, exactly. When we started playing out shows, we played a couple of shows where it was like a rock club, 21 and up. And so it's people of our age. It was a different vibe than if we got asked to go play some high school where the kids are standing right in front of our face, like on the floor. Yeah. And we were like, this is fucking amazing. So we absolutely loved playing the all ages shows more so than a typical rock club. So that was part of it too. We thought it was way more exciting and way more special, more
way more to connect to the people.
Yeah, exactly. So, but to us though, we weren't going to, it doesn't matter, that's just the way the shows go down. The music is what it is. So that's why we would kind of laugh sometimes when we would get called emo or punk, because we're like, well, listen to our record. I mean, it's pretty poppy. It's almost an insult to emo people, or insult to punk rock. I mean, but at the same time, I got to say this, now that I look back on all this, I think every band, you don't ever set out to sound how you're going to end up being thought of sounding. For instance, I bet the Descendants didn't say, hey, we're going to be punk rockers. Like they love all sorts of music, Beach Boys, 50s rock. They just did it their way. And it sounds that way. It's kind of the same with us. So we probably do sound maybe a little more punky, or to some people's ears, emo, than what we're intending. And that's totally fine. Because that's the thing. It's like you can't really perfectly direct how you're going to be perceived.
100%. But there's certain thing where bands like, I'm trying to think of Lemonheads, right? Or who's like Not a Surf. They were a band that they came along when it was after Green Day had broken big. Like they came in like the 96 or 97, I think it was when uh, Popular came out. But I felt that they were a band that they could play a show with bands playing clubs and they could fit in that, but they could also be on a Legion Hall floor, and people were like, yeah, this makes sense that you can kind of go between both. And I felt like you guys were that same thing. But there's some bands where there was a hard stop where you're like, no, you can't really, it doesn't work if you were in a Legion Hall.
Right. Yeah. No. I don't know if you know, but we toured with them a ton. We toured with them before they.
With Not a Surf?
Yeah, with Not a Surf. It was after.
wow.
It was after Popular, but it was before their sort of rise, their new rise. And so it was so great because so we get put together to play some shows with these guys. They're seen as at the time, yeah, they've kind of had their day. They're still out there playing shows, but you know, it's not on MTV anymore, and it didn't seem like people cared as much. But we met them, we thought they were fucking amazing. And we bonded really tightly with them on the road because they were the type of guys that they weren't trying to make MTV hits. They were just going to do their music regardless of what anybody thought. And it was kind of darker. Some of the stuff they were doing was a little bit darker and different. And we were hearing them start to play these songs of that would end up being on the next record that really started to really blow up for them again. And we were like, just always just being their cheerleaders and being like, dudes, this is good shit. And sure enough, they kept at it, and look at them now. I just love the fact they did not change for anybody. They were doing what they wanted to do. And the thing is, they were on the tour with us. We had a show a couple of times this happened where the All Ages show kind of fell through, but the promoter was like, well, we could have a house party. And so they totally played a house party with us in like Las Vegas, and it was amazing. They were the type of guys that would do that, you know? They weren't above everything. Hey, how's it going, Melin?
I was wondering what that noise was. I was like, what is that sound all of a sudden? I was like, it's her.
Yeah.
There was like some static sound when you came back in.
I was just telling the story of us touring with Not a Surf, how it was great that they stayed true to what they wanted to do. Even after they had lost the success of MTV, they kept doing what they were going to do, and they kept at it, and look at them now. Like we were right there seeing it happen.
I didn't realize honestly, I didn't realize they were still a band. I just went to their website as you're talking. Like they are over in March in Spain.
Oh yeah,
and
they're doing really
France.
Well. They're doing really well. Yeah, I think they have put out like a really consistent string of great records, and they're not
absolutely.
And they were written off. I'm telling you, they were written off when we
when they
out.
played with us. It was like they had to buy their record back from Elektra. And it was a 3-year-old record that Elektra dropped and never put out. And then they had to buy it back and put it out independently and like resurrect themselves on tour. And that's exactly what they did. And they were working on that next album and playing all those new songs live every night, you know, and we got to see that whole transition happen. It was amazing.
Yeah. Because I think a little bit, they may have gotten a little bit of, I don't know. We were big cheerleaders for them. I think that when they came out on the road with us together, and honestly, at that time, I don't think they were drawing that much, but we were really pumping them up. And I think it showed them that they could play these all ages shows, play anything, just keep at it. I'm not saying we are responsible, but
yeah, I think you overstated that a little, Bill.
Well, what we've learned so far is that
you can cut out that.
Your singing is the reason that Patrick Stump has a style.
Basically,
Not a Surf kept going. You guys done a lot of good stuff.
We're always right there cheerleading somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Tenacious D got signed because of us too. Let's just start talking about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
Wait, have you guys ever played with him? Or was that
Bill is talking about us being cheerleaders? We had the original Tenacious D HBO episodes on VHS, and we had a little TV in the van, and we would like every person that we stayed with, we would take the tapes and we would make them watch Tenacious D before we went to bed.
You guys were like just the underground cheerleaders that they didn't know that they had, or everyone heard about them.
It's funny because we were, you know, getting signed, and then we were signed to Sony, you know, to Epic Records, and we would start talking about, you know, Tenacious D to them, and they didn't know. They were like, oh, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like they were just whatever. And then sure enough, and we just kept always talking about it. Sure enough, they end up getting signed to Epic. And we were kind of like, I think we were the ones that talked him into it.
I like it. Man, what other bands did you guys get? No, I was kidding. Actually, Eric, this is a good timing because we were just talking about we were kind of going through, Bill, what got him into music and then how that led to where they started playing in shows in the scene, like how you guys plugged in. But Eric, you started talking about in the beginning of this interview where when you came into the band during the recording, but prior to that, Bill, like you had a different singer to start, and then you guys broke up. So let's talk a little bit about the first iteration and quickly how that morphed, where you guys were like, okay, well, we're gonna just change our sound right now, and then where Eric plugged in.
Well, the crazy thing is to think of how short the time span of this little timeline I'll lay out. I mean, this all happened probably within 2 years, which to these days that sounds like a long time. But basically all it was just me and Nick had been friends forever in Manhattan, Kansas, starting a band with a couple other friends. And, this is just a band. There's nobody coming to our shows. It's just us, doing it for fun, doing our best to like get in to open for some other band or do an open mic night or something. So we were what we were. And so then the singer left. And me and Nick had already been thinking a little bit about wanting to go more towards of a pop sound because we were getting really into like Guided by Voices and a lot of Guided by Voices. Mostly just that, because before that our sound was like a cross between Mudhoney, Sonic Youth, and Pearl Jam. As horrible as that sounds, and it was that. Just the typical late '90s type of thing. So anyway, so we had been getting into Guided by Voices and we liked the idea of just doing short pop songs again. And so Nick was like, well, we have the studio time booked, so let's just do it. We threw out all of our songs except for a couple. I decided to sing them. I basically had written the songs anyway. And I just did it, the melodies that I kind of wanted in my head, like we were saying earlier with the falsettos and stuff. It was pretty awesome because right away things started to change. Other bands in town were telling us that they thought we sounded a million times better, and they liked our shorter songs and our pop hooks and all this stuff. And so next thing you know, we are becoming friends with Eric and his band members who are in this band Truck Stop Love. And they were really successful in the Kansas scene and had put out major label record and all sorts of cool stuff. So getting to the point where these guys were our friends was huge for me and Nick. So next thing you know, we found out that Truck Stop Love was breaking up, and we immediately said, let's go get Eric Melin. Let's go beg him to be in our band, because we knew he liked us, and we had a feeling that we could maybe talk him into it. So we came and got him to be in the band, and we then finished up the first record, Electric Kissing Parties, which was the thing that we had started. We had the studio time as a 4-piece. So there's like 4 songs, I think, on there, 3 or 4 that have this other drummer. And those sessions are literally the sessions where me and Nick had 2 weeks to figure out what the hell this new band sound is. I think it's all the New Poisons, Downstairs Arena Rock, Circus Horrors, and like maybe one other song is literally that session. And then the other songs on that record, we had gotten Eric into the band. And then things just, started flying from there.
Yeah, that's what Eric was talking about earlier. Said Mott was in the band first, and he was faster and he was more metally.
Yeah,
I guess it's playing. And then when he left, so some of the songs you can hear that difference. And then Eric's song, you were saying that you did like the 2 slower songs, right? Or poppier songs?
2 of them, yeah. I mean, half the record is Mott and the other half is me. But Mott had no interest in doing Diamond Ring or the last song on the record.
Yeah, he wasn't loving the pop direction me and Nick wanted to go. And he's an amazing guy and an amazing friend. And one of the things about him is he's not going to do something he doesn't believe in 100%. And so he was like, yeah, I'm just not into this new sound. So that's why he ended up leaving.
But what do you really not like about it? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No.
I'm just totally joking.
Mott is like Bill's Syd Barrett, right? Like in Pink Floyd, Roger Waters wrote all of his best songs about Syd Barrett after, he left the band, and Bill's constantly using Mott as a character when he writes his songs.
Yeah. No, like I said, that's one of the things that's so great about him is he is the most he's got the most heart of any musician I've ever met. and he means it with every fiber of his being, you know, and he's a great guy. He wants to play British metal, basically. It didn't work with the flavor that me and Nick were kind of wanting to start doing.
So tell me about like Noisome Records. Like was that like, because I don't remember hearing this label. Was this like a friend or who put this together to put you guys out, or was it an already established label that gave you guys money to record?
They had another band called the Bubble Boys, which was a pop punk thing from Lawrence, Kansas. And remember, we're from Manhattan, which was K-State, which is 90 minutes west of Lawrence, Kansas. And Lawrence was the really cool hip scene, and Manhattan was the really small, tight-knit, awesome, but only if you knew about it scene. And Noisome from Lawrence was like, you know, hey, we really like your new stuff. And you know, I basically talked to them and I was like, you know, we could put a record out. We've got all these demos. We could put them all together and turn it into a record. And they were like, they heard it basically and just were like, yeah, absolutely. So I think we were the second band they had.
Once you guys put that out, what happened after that? Because obviously at this point, you know, you just kind of put this together. So did you start touring right away, or just start playing a lot of local shows to kind of get the name out?
A ton of local shows. And then the thing that really broke us was we sent out electric kissing parties to the College Music Journal, the CMJ. And they had this section where they would spotlight an unsigned band every week. And they put out a thing about electric kissing parties. And immediately we got booked at CMJ that year in New York at the festival. And then we started getting a lot of other weird things. Like we did this Mentos Fresh Makers band contest in Chicago. Or was that in Chicago or was that Denver? It was Denver.
Denver, yeah.
Yeah. And it happened to be Jamie and Rory from the Impossibles.
They were on that as well.
Anal Chin, I think. And you know, so it was just a bunch of weird stuff that happened at once. And essentially, you know, we took a lot of time off from our jobs and just went all over the country to play these weird shows. And, you know, the buzz happened really quickly and really organically after that.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's insane to think that we're talking about a span of like a year to 2 years. I mean, we were signed to a major label. It was pretty quick. But we were just gung-ho. That's the thing. We were absolutely gung-ho. There was no question in our minds that this is what we wanted to do. And so, like Eric said, we'd take off we worked shitty jobs on purpose so that we could leave. And we were determined to make it happen. And now I look back and I'm like, damn, dudes, we really were pretty gung-ho.
At what point did you sit down and have that conversation where you're going, all right, the three of us, this is where we want to get to. Are we all on the same page? And let's go for it.
Literally the first day we asked Eric to be in the band.
No shit.
Oh, yeah.
We even got together and did a little huddle. Like we were drinking and having a practice. We got together and did a little huddle and we're like, we're doing this.
Yeah. Well, because that was something that by that point in, I think, me and Nick's stage of being in different bands and Eric's stage of being in different bands, we all knew that a band is not going to work unless literally every single guy in that band is on that page. It has that as their attitude, that this is all or nothing. There can't be like anything separate, or it's not gonna. There's just not gonna be the engine to keep things moving forward. So we all gravitated to each other because of that. I think
there's a specific crowd listening to this podcast, and there are ones that are mid-30s to in our 40s, maybe into 50s, who are listening to this. So I don't think there's any newer bands in their 20s who are listening to this, but I've heard so much good advice where that right there is key, which my band, like we definitely didn't. We kind of had that. I think a couple of us had that conversation on the side, but it was never that group thing where we were like, all of us, do we all have the same vision, and do we feel like this is going to happen, and we will do whatever it takes, where everyone's like, fuck yes, fuck yes, fuck yes.
What part of the country were you in? Are you on East Coast?
Yeah, we were from Jersey.
Well, I think that's a big part of it personally, you know, is the Midwest band scenes, you know, wherever they may be, you know, Chicago, Minneapolis, Kansas City, Lawrence. It's like, it's a different thing. Now that I moved out here to LA and I see how LA musicians are, it's so different than what it was like growing up in the Midwest. It's like you're in the basement you are creating a gang. It's not just like, oh, let's call that guy, he plays guitar. It's like, oh, let's convince somebody to be the guitar guy. There's just not the professionalism. And so therefore anybody that's really all about it, like they are all about it.
So there's some scheming.
Yeah.
Some scheming of how we're going to steal this person,
Right?
get them in the band.
Or at least I don't know. Maybe it's the same way on the East Coast, but it feels like there's, from what I've seen, at least compared to the West Coast.
Anytime I looked at Chicago, I just thought every one of those bands just fucking had it figured out. Their sound was always good, and they were just tight from the outside. I'm sure inside it could be a different story. And I thought the same thing too with like the Midwest, because I mean, you guys come from the same place. Obviously, people know the Get Up Kids, and a band that I love is Coalesce.
Yeah.
There was just this extra big element of you guys coming out there where if we would meet any of these bands, we'd be like, are we allowed to talk to them? They're so fucking cool, and like they've got their shit together. Like we don't have that. So like when you guys would come through, like when I saw that flyer on your Instagram from that Wayne Firehouse show, I mean, this podcast started about talking specifically about Jersey, and then I wanted to branch out and talk to the bands that influenced us, and it's how it led to, you know, the conversations like this happening, where like when you guys came into town, you were one of those bands where we were just like, holy shit, these guys are playing the Legion Hall right now. And it was just like, this is crazy. Like we created something here where it's like a magnet where like bringing bands in. Like there was a couple of shows in that same Legion Hall where I think you guys played in the back room, in the smaller room. And then we ended up branching out. The Ricky Supporta, who put on shows, I think he put on that show maybe with you guys. He brought into the other room where he brought in a stage and like at the drive-in played there. Jimmy Eat World fucking played there.
Yeah.
Like, you know, all these bands as they're like blowing up. So we're like, how are we bringing these guys here? These are all the people we look up to.
Yeah.
I think we played there with At the Drive-In, didn't we, Bill?
I mean, I don't know. We did a big tour with At the Drive-In and the Get Up Kids, but I don't.
What?
Oh yeah. That was the best. That was the best tour we ever did, hands down.
Good God.
And
what year was that?
It would have been 99 or 98 because it was right as we were getting signed to Sony.
Whoa.
It's so fucking amazing. But yeah, like what you were describing, just the scene exploding, you know, so organically. And that's the thing. It's like we were like coming from, hey, we want to be on the radio and be on MTV unabashedly. You know, we're still going to be our kind of music, you know, inspired by Sonic Youth meets Guided by Voices meets The Replacements or whatever, but we still want to make pop music. And then, you know, we're kind of thrown into this super punk rock underground, you know, playing churches, playing fire stations or whatever. But oh my God, was it cool.
Eric, what were you going to say? You were going to chime in there.
Oh, I was just going to say that tour opened our eyes because we had mainly been doing bars before that. And, you know, we're touring in our van and sleeping on people's floors and stuff. And then we meet up with the Get Up Kids and At the Drive-In, and the Get Up Kids are in a tour bus. But that tour bus is parked in front of an American Legion Hall. And there's like kids down the block, you know, this huge line of kids to get in. The promoter is in high school. The stage is like this barely level thing that's like moving around in the shittiest possible room. But the crowds and the kids coming to the shows were amazing. And it was just like a big eye opener for us because we were kind of sick of playing bars anyway.
I think I remember that tour. It could have been the same one. So my buddy Justin put on a show at Sacred Heart University in Connecticut, and At the Drive-In and the Get Up Kids played there.
That was it. Yeah. Yep, that was it. And I'm pretty sure I even remember that show. I have a really bad memory, but sometimes I remember really specific things. And I think that show, the power went out or something while we were trying to play, and we just kind of like started doing something crazy, and it totally won over the kids in the crowd.
My band had played a show earlier, and me and my singer, we took off to drive from Jersey to there, which was like 2 hours away. So we got there as that show ended, because that show was in like a cafeteria.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And then I don't know if you guys were there this, but we ended up going back to Justin's apartment, and James DeWeese came and partied with us. Because the rest of the guys in the Get Up Kids, I remember they were on that tour bus. They were like, "Nah, we're gonna sleep in there." So James was like, those guys are being lame. I'm gonna come drink with you. So he ended up drinking with us. Were you? I know this is really stretch, but do you happen to remember if you were at that party?
Probably.
Because there's also a funny story. Okay. I feel like you guys were there.
If you remember a bald guy hanging out with DeWeese, I'm sure that was probably Nick.
I think so. But here's the story: was that we were all getting hammered, and then they were like, let's go to a supermarket. So they went and got food. So my buddy Chris and Bob took James and some other person to the supermarket, and they ended up buying Depends because they wanted to piss in them to see if they actually held the piss. I don't But this is a true story. Like I think James, I think he was one of the people doing this because I think he like instigated it or something like that. But I don't know. I'm just kind of going off track here, but that was like a really fucking funny story. Anyway.
Well, and you know that we were the very first Reggie and the Full Effect backing band, right?
I did not know that.
Yeah. The first full tour.
I thought the Get Up Kids were.
Yeah, the first tour that James put together for Reggie and the Full Effect, he had Ultimate Fakebook plus Matt Pryor as his band. So we did a couple of tours, but it was awesome because we wore all black. We had this huge backdrop that with a logo that was absolutely unreadable. It was like one of those super prickly death metal crazy logos, but it said Reggie and the Full Effect. We opened with Rain and Blood by Slayer. It was awesome. It was fun.
I mean, I could go off on that, but I would want to talk about that, but I really want to keep talking about you guys.
No, totally.
But God, I just imagine how fun that is when you're like, wow, we can do this without, there's like no, I mean, it was professionalism, but like we can be as fucking weird as possible and just follow his lead to make this weird thing happen, which he did.
Yeah.
Which is incredible.
Yeah, we had that tour. We had to open up the show as Ultimate Fakebook, and then Hot Rod Circuit would play, and we would go back and change our clothes and towel off and ice down our arms, and then come back in costume as Reggie in the Full Effect.
Yeah, I've reached out to him on Instagram to see if he wants to get interviewed, but I haven't heard anything back. So maybe we'll talk about that if I get him on. You guys, Eric, you had mentioned Impossibles and Animal Chin. For some reason in my mind, I have it that were you guys like friends with those guys where you did some tours with them?
Yeah, we did a big tour with the Impossibles, and we also played with Jamie's band, The Stereo.
That was it. So I remembered there was something about The Stereo and you guys with these buddy bands that would go out together.
Definitely, yeah.
Totally.
And we did a split 7-inch with The Stereo as well.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now it kind of comes full circle because Jamie from The Stereo and Impossibles actually mixed our brand new record because he.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he does studio work in Arizona now, and he's mixed. He mixed the latest Smoking Popes record, and a ton of other stuff. And so he did an amazing job on our new record. So we are super excited about him. He's really good. If anybody out there of this scene has a new record, you should definitely look him up to mix it. I mean, he did amazing work on ours.
You guys get on Noisome Records. You put out Electric Kissing Parties, and then in '99 you put out This Will Be Laughing Week. I said that so. This Will Be Laughing Week. And then so you put that record out. And how much touring were you guys doing in that time?
Well, we didn't have jobs. We quit all of our jobs and just basically went on tour. And the thing that I like to say is that at one point we didn't have homes. We put all of our stuff in storage and just hit the road in the van, and we're pretty much gone all the time. And the result of that, I think, was, meeting everybody and seeing all the people that were out on this circuit and playing in front of all those kids. And that's eventually kind of just what got us in front of, people to get us signed. But we did This Will Be Laughing Week over, I guess, three or four weekends in a row. So maybe a couple sessions over weekends by ourselves in Eudora, Kansas.
With Ed Rose.
Yeah. And then when Sony eventually decided to sign us, they basically took that album as is and reissued it, and we added 2 more songs. With Ed, we went back in the studio and added 2 more songs to it, and they put that out as is. So there was like zero interference or zero like anything from them. They just said, we want to put this out. So it got issued twice.
Yeah, we did remaster it with like basically the biggest mastering person in the world, in New York City. But it's the same exact recording as our indie release from Noisome.
Wait, who was that? Who was the person in New York?
Ted Jensen.
Oh, okay. I was thinking of some other guy that did a lot of records too. How did you guys get the whole Epic or the Sony thing?
I mean, I just remember them coming to see us at the Bowery Ballroom in New York City.
Yeah, basically, we had hooked up with Chris Gillespie as a manager, a guy who's from Lawrence, Kansas, but moved out to New York City and had been working at different indie labels. And he was at Matador Records at the time. And he loved us as a band, but he's like, yeah, you guys aren't right for Matador. I really think you're probably a major label kind of sound. And that's exactly how we approached it too. Like we would think of like match the band to the label by what kind of sound the band is going for. And we were going for something that would be on MTV, be on the radio, but still rap. So anyway, so he just ended up pitching us to Epic. And so they came out and saw us play a show in New York City. There was like 6 people in the crowd. And we find out later that half of the people in the crowd were label types, A&R people. And it wasn't long after that they offered us a deal. He flew out to Kansas City to see us play in front of our kind of hometown crowd. And we did it.
What did they promise you guys, and what did they actually hold true to?
Well, basically for us, it was a 2-album deal. It was pretty simple. It was like, hey, we love this record. We think it's got total potential. We're going to put it out, but we know that then we want to make another record with you guys and do it in a big studio and do it on a major label budget rather than, like what Eric was saying, the weekend budget, which that was basically our goal, was to get that to, we knew that if we signed to a major label, all we could hope for was at least a chance to go make a big record and give it a shot. We knew it wasn't like, oh, they're going to dig in for 6 records, or whatever. That was what they offered to us. And then the reality of what happened was the record does come out. It got a little bit of radio play, actually, fairly respectable amount of radio play, but not enough to make a big splash. There was restructuring, at Epic from the top level down. And so their division of Epic that they were putting records out on, which had Ben Folds 5, Fuel, Mandy Moore. I mean, it had really big artists, Celine Dion, but they closed that little part of Epic. There wasn't really a reason to keep us going on. That's kind of what happened. So we didn't end up getting to do the second record, but, we thankfully had good enough lawyers to write into our contract that we still would get that bought out. So we took the money from being bought out of our deal and just bought a brand new van in cash, just walked in and bought the newest, best van they had and lived off what they gave us to tour for the next year or so. Just kept at doing the exact same thing we were doing, basically. We didn't stop at all.
God. Eric, you were laughing when I asked that question. Was there anything you wanted to add?
Oh, well, we yeah, I don't know. No, I mean, I guess I have a big issue with Sony because, or with Epic, mainly based on the fact that we told them that the single that they picked was too complicated and had too many parts for the radio. And they said, well, it was a success in your hometown, so we're going to start with that. And we kept telling them every night, we see people react to this other song, Soaked in Cinnamon. So please, at least give us an opportunity to put that out as a single before you stop promoting this first record. And they said, yeah, we'll do that. And then they didn't. And so we told them, tell me what you want was too weird and complicated. And that Soaked in Cinnamon was going to be the one, and they didn't listen to us.
Well, but you want to know what Eric's saying is, we're playing every night and we're seeing Soaked in Cinnamon go over so great, So did Tell Me What You Want, but it was just one of those things where we were like, we have one shot here, people.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, you guys were talking earlier about Bill's falsetto. Soaked in Cinnamon is like the song for that.
Right.
So if that's become our signature bit and a thing that people recognize us for, well, that just kind of tells us that was a missed opportunity. So.
But one thing that I like is it is obvious that the radio did impact our band, because still to this day, Tell Me What You Want has the most Spotify streams, and I don't think that's a coincidence.
Yeah. Well, I mean, actually, no. She Don't Even Know My Name. That's just slightly below it.
Below Tell Me?
Yeah, Tell Me it's got 51,000. She Don't Even Know My Name. That's the song that I remembered the most from back then. That's got 49,000.
So yeah, I really think that because we played like a big radio festival on the East Coast. It got a little bit of radio play. I remember we played in Little Rock, Arkansas, and they had been playing the song on the radio, and it drew a ton of people to our shows. That's kind of cool. That's the thing. We knew there was potential to have that keep going. That was what was frustrating. We were like, dudes, we know we've got some songs that can get this certain kind of crowd. Like, we were seeing it work. And so it was a little frustrating when it was like they let go so quickly. But, you know, that's how it goes with major labels.
Did you guys get any like negative backlash for signing to Sony?
No, not at all. Because anybody that knew us knew that's what we were doing, was our flavor.
Yeah, there's like certain bands that can get away with that, and other bands that were like, "Fuck you, you sell." And you're like, Jesus Christ, I gotta live, man.
Well, right, and like I said, we were matching the music to the label. What we think of our music was accessible, catchy pop songs, as opposed to like really dirty punk or something. But that's the thing. It's just like that's the thing that the point I was getting at earlier with like what people's intentions are versus how people perceive somebody. I think it would probably blow most people's minds to think, to realize that like the Get Up Kids, they were inspired by like Counting Crows and like other bands that it's like, I don't think that the scene kids would realize was in the mix. Like, you just think of the Get Up Kids as being so punk rock and so of that sound, but they were like us. They grew up listening to the radio and listening to big alternative type bands. What ends up being the perception or ends up being the sort of scene can have takes on a life of its own. After a while, you look back and you're like, well, I guess that was what we are. We are a little more punky than I realized. It's just, it wasn't.
I think it might also rub off on you a bit too, because if you started off wanting to be that way, but then you show up and you're playing Legion halls and firehouses and churches and stuff, there's something about that element that's around you, or that right. What am I trying to say? Like, yeah, what you're in, it's like the people you're talking to and stuff, like in the bands you're watching, because that's what you're seeing all the time.
Yeah,
that's going to sneak into what you're doing.
That's totally true. We started wearing almost exclusively. We'd just be wearing the band shirts of the bands we were on tour with or that we saw live. Like, we were just wearing band T-shirts. If we would have just been a bar band, that probably wouldn't have necessarily been the case.
Yeah, it would have been like a lot more thought put into something. I will say though, I'm looking at your Facebook page and the shirt you guys have, where it's the three of your faces with the kiss makeup. That's fucking genius. The best thing too is that you have your glasses on over the Paul Stanley makeup.
Yes.
That's fucking amazing. So like you guys, so you got off Sony, and was there any like, when you got on the label, was there like one tour that stood out to you that was, holy shit, I can't believe we're on this, or some show you played or it was just gigantic?
There was really only one show that we ever got that that happened because we were on Sony, and it was a radio festival in Syracuse, New York.
Yeah.
And it was crazy because it was like, I don't know, 20,000 people. So it was the biggest show we ever played, but we were the second or third band on a bill with like 7 bands, and all the bands were like, you know, the radio hit bands of the time, like Wheatus. Do you remember Wheatus?
No, I do not.
They had that song, band. Teenage Dirtbag.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
One hit wonder type deal, right?
Yeah.
And so,
like Harvey Danger and shit like that.
Yeah, and so we were playing on this big music festival with this radio festival sponsored by a commercial alternative station, and we're opening the show, and you know, when we're done, it's awesome because we played in front of, you know, thousands of people, but we immediately went over to the merch booth and signed autographs and said hi to everybody. And what we remember, or at least what I remember from that show, is that most of the other bands were kind of hidden in their tour bus until they played, and then, you know, they would come out and do their show, and then they were gone. And it was like, we took this mentality of, you know, the band who's been touring in a van for, you know, the last couple years, and how we're extremely approachable, and we took that to this show, and we were like, wow, these are like completely different worlds. Like, this is not what we want to do. And so I remember going back to Sony and telling them, you know, they were like, hey, we want to get you a big time booking agent and put you on big tours. And we were like, we want to keep our booking agent, and we want to continue to do these, you know, punk rock style tours with the bands that we like. So we actually told Sony, we don't want to do your big plan and get on these shows with Fuel and bands like that. We want to stick with what we're doing. That was probably the reason that we didn't last.
But that is a good point. That is a good point, that even though we didn't see ourselves necessarily as punk rockers, we didn't see ourselves at all like the major label band that stays in their tour bus. We still were like Eric described. We wanted to hang out with people and be, down to earth, and because we are down to earth. So I guess there is that aspect of us that is definitely closer to the punk rock scene.
You guys got off of Sony. What was what that looked like? Because it looked like you were on Sony 2000, and by 2002, you put out Open Up and Say Awesome, and then 2003 Before We Spark, and then there's this giant gap between that and 2010. So like you get off of Sony, what did that look like afterwards? Were you guys like still going strong and like still able to fill Legion halls or smaller clubs, and you were like, great, we can keep doing this, or did it just start to kind of fizzle?
Yeah, basically this is how we actually started headlining our shows after we were dropped with Sony. The next tours we were doing, we were the headliners at all the different venues. I mean, not necessarily huge places, but I mean, sometimes, like the Troubadour in LA. I remember we headlined Emos in Austin. So, like 500 people or so. So we were, as a band, just as strong as ever. But the thing what kind of happened was we went right into making Open Up and Say Awesome. We took hardly any time off, recorded that record, and it went out on Initial Records, like you said. And they were great guys and really, really good at what they did. But it was never going to be quite the same distribution and reach as what we had done before on the major label. So it was just the type of thing where just not enough people even knew we had a new record. So then we just toured like crazy on that. And by that point, we're starting to get to where, we're getting burnt out because we really didn't take any break. We put out the EP, which was stuff that we actually recorded, which was intended to be a split with Reggie and the Full Effect, actually, like a split album, like where he did half and we did the other half. And then he didn't want to do that anymore, or was doing something else, and so we then just decided to release that as its own EP. But basically, like I said, by that point we were burnt out, but we were drawing more than we'd ever drawn before.
Eric, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we were still doing our thing, and we told Sony we were going to do that thing, and we continued to do it afterwards on Initial, and Initial was great, and they swooped in real quick and let us make those records just like we did with Ed, by ourselves in that studio in Eudora, Kansas. And I remember it being a really good time and really creative time. But then, like Bill said, you get burnt out on the road. And I think it got to the point where it was just like, we added another member at one point, my friend and roommate, JD Warnock, and we were a 4-piece for a while. And then we went to Europe and we did our first and only European tour. And that was kind of awesome, but it was kind of brutal because it was like, you're kind of like you're starting over in another continent. That's
kind of a common thing, as bands kind of getting burnt out at the point when they do their first European tour. I've heard many people say that, and that definitely happened.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun on that tour, but it was, 3 or 4 years in a row, it just nonstop touring. And I think it just got to be, and I know Bill was writing new stuff and he was just like, I don't know, man, I'm burnt out on everything. And so the band, when you talk about that middle period, it's not really a middle period. We broke up, like we were done. The band broke up. Bill moved to California, and Nick and I got day jobs, and I went back to school and, finished a film degree, and Bill went on to edit trailers and stuff. And, that thing in 2010 just came out. The B-sides came out because of the reunion show that we played in 2009. So the band was officially done by 2004.
I think the way we said it, what we said was we are retiring from touring. We never really said, hey, we're breaking up, because I think that it's like, that's what it was. It was like, we just can't keep doing this machine. The machine has to sort of stop. It doesn't mean it's final in some way. We didn't want to make it
felt, Bill.
Well, I know, but I felt
like we broke up.
Well,
I had to figure out how I was going to pay my rent.
It's effectively broke up. But yeah. I just mean, because sometimes people will ask me, they'll be like, oh, but how did you guys get back together? Or how is it calling back everybody to get, and it's like, no, it was easy. I mean, we still love each other and are all friends and want to make music together sometimes. It was just that what Ultimate Fakebook was in that capacity, we had to stop that. Yeah, but we have another capacity.
having to keep it going as a business is what broke us up, and
Yeah.
that sucked. That was the shitty part of it. And so people ask, like, why did you get back together in 2009? And it's really simple. Someone asked us to.
And it was fun.
And then it's like, well, why did you do this, show? And it's like, somebody asked us to. And so when we signed to Sonic Ritual for this new album, the guy that runs the label, Todrick, was like, what are your tour plans? And we're like, we don't have any. We all have day jobs. And he said, well, what if somebody asks you to play? And we said, well, yeah, we'll do it. So all these people on our, social media pages that are like, we want a tour. It's like, well, we can't tour,
No.
but invite us out for a weekend. And if we can make it, we'll do it.
There's something nice to that luxury though now that you almost wish you kind of had back then, but there's something like common to be like, hey, we can do this. Like you don't really have that as a younger band because you still have to make your name and all that stuff. But it's like
we were trying to make being in a band our day job, and it was our day job, for 5 years straight. We literally had no other jobs. So that's where it's like, if you're going to keep that level going, it takes, a lot of work, and it gets really hard out there, obviously, as anybody who, tours these days knows. But where I get the feeling of what the luxury is now is it's an amazing thing that there are still tons of people that would like to see our band or like to hear our music. Like that's fucking amazing. And so we're not going to be assholes and just be like, oh, we're done. Screw that. No, we're going to be like, wow, thank you. That's so cool that you guys still want to hear more and like to come out and see a show every now and then. So we see it as we're the lucky ones that get to do that still. That's a great place to be. But it's very different than when you're trying to make it be your day job. Then you got a lot more going into everything.
Well, I mean, there's something too about like just that point where you guys finally burned out. It's you just living in this, you're just cycle over and over. It's on the road, go to a next show, unload your shit, play the show, talk to people, get back in the van, either drive that night, stay at someone's house, maybe afford a hotel, do it again, and you get it back from tour. You're like, here's another 3-week stretch or 3-month stretch, and it's you keep doing it. Where you guys were like, well, we want to do this whole MTV thing and get big, and it's like you're just kind of like it's just like you're not getting there, but you're like still getting this ability to keep doing the one thing. Where you're just kind of like, I just don't want to. It's like, where are we going?
Right. No, exactly. I mean, that was exactly it for me. But then to segue to that's what's so great now in my mind for the new record is now this record can be just an actual expression of what we liked in the first place about music and friends and being together. It has nothing to do with hoping this is going to be some hit or hoping this is going to be something that keeps us on the road, or it's literally, it just feels more real to how we are right now. Even by our third record, I honestly, I listen back to Open Up and Say Awesome, and I just hear that I was just keeping songs coming. There wasn't necessarily stuff that I'd die if I didn't make it. And I think that our new record feels a lot more like our first two to me, where it feels like I'll die if I don't make this song. This is what I have to make be out there in the world. And so that's what's cool, is to be able to just make it be about the record again.
Is there like a band or maybe a couple bands, if they reached out to you guys and said, hey, we're doing this tour, we're getting back together and doing this, we want you guys to come out for a week or two, like what band would that be where you'd be like, oh, these guys easily?
Oh, if somebody, like, who's a dream band, if we could have any band ask us to go do something?
Yeah.
It's a good question.
I would love when Eric laughs.
Yeah. Because it's like I can think of a million bands that we would rattle off that'd be like, man, that'd be very tempting.
And kind of narrow it down. It could either be a band you never played with or a band from back in the day who would still draw. Like Piebald, they went on tour with Dashboard Confessional recently.
Yeah.
And I don't think they were like buddies back then. I don't really know, but I was talking to Travis. He's like, yeah, we're going for a week. It's fucking crazy. And the tickets prices are insane, but we're going to do it.
I mean, it probably would be somebody that we would consider our heroes. Like if Cheap Trick asked us to do a string of dates, I'm pretty sure we would follow ourselves to say yes. even though, who knows where we'd be playing or what it would be for. That'd be purely because it would be a thrill to us.
But since we did one Cheap Trick show back in the day where we opened up for them, and it was just us and them, and that was the realization of a dream. And then after Ultimate Fakebook broke up, Nick and I were in a band called the Dead Girls, and we opened for Kiss. So
what?
Yeah. So my goals have all been reached. Like I have no more a professional or dream band, moments left. So that's a tough question for me. I'm lucky in that I realized those too.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
We won a contest.
It was a radio promotion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They came through Kansas City, and Buck Cherry was on their tour, and Buck Cherry was playing Too Close to Kansas City. You know how they have those weird things in your rider where it's like, or your contract where it's like, oh, you played too close to this venue, so you can't open on this show because it's a conflict. So Buck Cherry was taken off of that show, and the local radio station had a contest, and I heard about it. So we entered that and just fucking killed it and made it happen.
Yeah.
That's so fucking awesome.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I think our answers should show you pretty much that's what we do this for. Yeah. We're just fans of music. We want to make hit songs because that keeps you being a rocker. But it's like, you've got to do it for the love and for for us, it's about the heroes. And we try to be a band that reflected that we want to be a little larger than life, a little bit of characters, because those are the heroes that got us doing what we do.
The thing I love about these conversations is like I got to really see the behind the scenes of bands that I looked up to or I never heard anything negative about. And it's like looking back at my old band, I wish that we had a lot of successes that a lot of bands I talked to had, or just like that same vision or just like that positive attitude the whole time. I'm sure there was some roughs. I'm sure there must have been like little hiccups here and there, but I just think it's always interesting to me that bands that just back then just genuinely, it just worked. Obviously there was a point where it stopped, but it just seemed like you really just had to have that passion for it and just that love for it and not make it like, it's got to be like a balance of business, but you really got to fucking love it.
Oh, absolutely. We were really bad at the business part. We were really focused on the band and on the music, and the three of us did have this shared vision that we were going to bring a stadium rock Kiss type show to indie rock venues and to the punk rock scene. We wanted to have a sense of humor and we had like rickety, shitty little stage lights and Bill would jump on a box that would light up and smoke would come out of it, which we stole from Cheap Trick. And, and we did this all in our van. It broke down into, a couple pieces of wood and in our van, and we packed it in with our gear. And then every night, we'd unload it and Bill would put it together on the stage, and there'd be we called it the rock box, and there would be like a little power strip, and we would hand it to somebody in the front row and say, when Bill stands on this, turn it on. Like there was no stagecraft or automation. It was literally like a kid in the front row would turn on the light when Bill stood on it, and it became this thing that like kids would fight to be in the front row so that they could run the rock box. And there were some times where Bill would jump up on it and the light wouldn't come on, and you would see the kid next to the guy nudging him going, turn it on, turn it on. Like it became like this thing that we wanted to bring that ridiculousness and that sense of fun to this kind of punk rock underground scene, because we felt like bands were way too self-serious sometimes. And so we had that shared vision, and I think that really helped.
Well, and the thing about us too is like we love tons of self-serious bands that are quote unquote important and stuff. But just what happens to bring us three together is kind of wanted to have a little bit more fun. So we're not trying to say that I always like to think of us as the band that some really good band has fun going to see. We're your night off, and you're just going to not take it so seriously, have a good time, but also not want to not feel bad about the fact, oh God, it's so cheesy. We had some cheese, but it was like still a certain kind of cheesiness. It was mostly celebrating rock and roll.
Faking or pretending. It came from the heart. Our cheese is real. We have real pasteurized American cheese, not cheese product.
Exactly. And
locally sourced.
Yeah,
totally,
organic
totally.
cheese.
And so yeah, it's like, somebody shared a picture from back in the day of me standing on the rock box, but and there's these kids like right there, they're so close. We're like playing in some like community center, on a Wednesday night with smoke machines, and we're all fucking like 25. And I'm just like, that's what life's about. It's like rock and roll. Should be fun.
I always love that little bit of effort, because if you go to a show at like a stadium show, you expect there to be just crazy shit going on. But if you go to a local show, you just expected the lights in the rest of the room would go down, and there's like the two lights above them would just be on, and that's it. But those bands that just take this little bit of effort and do these things, those are things that were memorable afterwards, where you like the band, you like their sound, you like their presence, and oh yeah, did you remember when they did this thing? Like that was, it's smart. And it's also it's also better too when it is that genuine thing where you're driving like, hey, I got this idea, let's try this out, and you do it, and you're like, holy shit, we got to keep doing that.
Well, yeah, and also, all the bands in the bigger stages, with playing Hard Rock Hotel or whatever, the House of Blues or whatever, have all this production. They have all this stuff. They've got tunings, like auto-tuned vocals. They've got so many bells and whistles. And we were very, very adamant about, no, this is fucking rock and roll. This is the Replacements. This is old school bands that just got up on stage and just brought it. And so we played pop songs, but we presented it like that. And so that's kind of what Eric was describing too, about that live song that's on the B side of Manhattan, Kansas. It's like, it's just raw. Hey dudes, I'm going to have to go here pretty soon.
Yeah, actually, so Eric had to jump up. Eric, did you jump off already? Yeah,
no, he
you
jumped
could
up.
Take a call.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is where I actually was going to end it. So 2 questions before we go. 1, what would you like to plug?
Well, we have a brand new album that we just recorded very recently, and it's coming out April 10th. And the record is called The Preserving Machine, and it's our first record in 16 years. And so it's an album that, it's very personal. It goes into all of our history a little bit. It talks about a lot of different friends, that we became big parts of our band's history. And so it's for fans, it's for us. But it's also, like I said, I think that I found a way to dig into the writing that makes the best kind of shit. It's like a little time away sometimes is what you needed. So that's coming out in April. We got a brand new video that we did that's really silly for one of the tracks on it. That's going to come out March 27th. So all of our stuff is sort of like happening just on our social media. We don't really have tours and stuff. So it's just at UFB Rocks for Twitter, and then our Facebook page, Ultimate Fakebook. You can find all the stuff kind of going on. So we're interacting a ton with our fans and doing silly things here and there. But it's basically, it's all about the new record coming out. So it's just kind of a fun time for us right now.
So last question, so I end every podcast with, what scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
Well, I don't know. I don't know of any like scene ethics in the sense of like, somebody told me, hey, this is a quote unquote scene ethic. I would just maybe have my own or our own that we sort of would do. And we feel strongly about like, if somebody gives you a show, you give them a show back if you can, especially when you're all just sort of starting out and helping each other get shows. If somebody helps you get onto a show, we always make sure to help somebody else get a show.
I think that's great. That's the first time I've heard that one. That's excellent.
Yeah. I mean, that's just because, the scene we came up in, in Kansas, it's like without the other bands supporting everybody else's shows, there wouldn't even be a scene.